What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. You are watching TWA Motorsports, and today, back on the Trans Am. Yes, in the last video, we cut a big hole in the floor. I'm sure everybody thought that was dumb. That's all I do is dumb stuff. But we now have an access panel for down the road. Now, look, does it matter because we took the tank out? Technically, no. But look, I went back and forth on fuel systems, just like everything else on this build that's been apart for so long. In this box right here, I have a stage 1 fuel system from Hair on Speed. It requires more than I wanted to put in right now. This car, I just want to get it running and driving again, and I don't need that much fuel pump. But at the same time, we're going to be making more power than what the factory made. And so I'd like to upgrade, and to be honest with you guys, the fuel pump was weak in this thing anyway, so it was giving me fits. So I'm gonna go grab the gas tank. It's actually on the other side over there. We've moved some stuff around. I don't know whether I've showed you a video on some of this stuff, but anyway, we moved some stuff around and I put the gas tank over there because I power washed it. So let's get it over here where it's kind of in the middle where I can work on it. And let's get started on the new fuel system setup. It's in a box right here. I'll kind of show you guys as we unbox it what's going on, and we'll go from there. Here's probably what you're thinking. Holy cow, that's a new tank. No, I'm just that good with the power washer, guys. I unhooked some of this stuff. Actually, this thing had a ton of gas in it I dumped out. It was old, and you can see when I put these back on, I put this back together to power wash it. The only way I could find to dump it out, it wouldn't come out of the fill, because there's like something to keep somebody from siphoning gas. So I took the pump out. So it should be relatively easy to get this thing loose, but we need to unhook the lines. Probably gonna have to use 2 hands. These are all pinch connections. You pinch the plastic here, should be able to pull all this apart. And then what I'm gonna be using is, this is always a good idea. You don't have to, especially since this is a plastic tank, but it's still not a bad idea. Use a brass punch to hit this and roll this ring around, and we'll be able to get the pump out. Now, since I already had this out, maybe it won't be so hard. Yeah, I didn't think it would be. I'm gonna use the hammer anyway, but that's basically what we're doing. We're rolling this ring off and out of the way, and then we should be able to grab the pump. Once we release that, we should be free. Obviously, there's 2 electrical connections that were already undone, but you get the pump out of this thing. Just be careful when you're coming to the float that you don't like screw it up. This is probably a 2-handed job, and I probably should have the tripod set up, but there we go. And this is gonna have gas on it. I mean, this tank had gas in it. So we got it apart. Now that we got it apart, let's take a look at our new replacement stuff. There's still just a hair of gas in there. I couldn't get it all poured out. It wanted to go into these sections when I flipped it upside down before I power washed it. But let's grab our box of goodies. Now, pretty popular in the world of Fbody is Racetronix. And what Racetronix has supplied me with, which by the way, guys, I think these are actually for my, I bought these from Racetronix too. That's to tie up, that's the straight pieces I needed to finish the trans cooler, so they're in there. Got a couple wiring harnesses, a couple fittings. These are for the battery because we run power up to the front. This comes with an additional harness. Now that's what this guy is, okay? So this harness is gonna run from here, and I think it's all plug and play all the way up to the front of the car. Now look, this is for the 99 to 02 with the plastic tank. If you have a 98, separate module, but they also have you covered there. But check this out. Got a new pump in here. So let's open this up first. And I think that's gonna be pretty self-explanatory. This right here though, we may put up on the bench and assemble it. Now in the box, we got a pump, we've got a sock, we've got a couple clips, it looks like, and a hose clamp, and another sock. Not sure what maybe it's for different applications, but all right, let's get this thing all opened up. I'm gonna go through the instructions and we'll kind of talk you guys through how this is gonna work. What's great about these pumps is they're like I said, they're pretty much plug and play, so you don't have a whole lot to do, but We do have some connections to make, but it's got a nice foam piece around it. This is a 255 liter per hour pump. Should be good to about 600 NA. We're not going to make that, at least I don't think, but maybe down the road we put some nitrous on it or something. But like I said, I put this whole access panel in because down the road I do plan to do forced induction on this, and this pump will not support that. But I have the ability now to take one pump out without removing this whole assembly. But let's get started. It says the first thing we need to do is grab the pump, and we're going to have to remove the fuel level. It says gently remove the float. Now to remove the float, it says put a small pick in here and gently pry this out, which I can imagine it's probably, I mean, that's how it reads. So we got to be really careful to pull this arm off. So it says gently, and I literally pried up here and it flew right off. So not much there. Next step is slide the round tank seal off the bottom of the fuel tank module. Mine doesn't have a tank seal. I'm assuming that's what stayed on here, right? Is that what they're talking about? I don't see a tank seal like what they're talking about. You see on this black piece. Yeah, I don't see that. Now it says to remove the fuel pump feed, which is this guy right here. And it says to cut it. I just cut it with a razor blade and got it off there, as you can see. Be careful, don't go too deep. The next thing we need to do is remove this clip, which we did. We'll set it aside. And what that should allow us to do, I think next, we'll be able to unplug it. Using a small pair of pliers, gently squeeze the locking tabs together and unplug. So we'll do that next. We'll get a pair of needle nose in there and unplug that unit. Helps to have a pair of bent needle nose like this. So I've got that unplugged. Wasn't too bad actually. So now it's saying use a flat blade screwdriver, and we need to remove or push these clips out so this basket starts to slide. Once we've done that, we slide it down, and we're trying to gain access to this guy right here, okay? And we're gonna cut that, it says, right above the bump, okay? So on this side of that bump. Once we got that cut, it's saying that we need to take a small pick or something, and we need to release the two tabs on the power connector here. So you can see those, we're needing to pull this lock out of place. Next, they actually supply you a safety pin, which I have clip releases, but you can use the safety pin they gave you, and we're going to be pulling out I. So if you look at their description, you're looking at the plug this way, with the plug on the top, or the clip on the top. I is this bottom left corner according to the instructions. Should be a purple wire, but you've got two purple wires. Just make sure that you get this one. You put the safety clip in the front, you should be able to pull this out now that the lock's out. Here's another way you can tell you've got the right one. It's the one that goes to the sender. Okay, so where we had the arm, that's the one it goes to. So make sure that you're pulling the purple wire that goes to that. Now we need to separate these two pieces, which may mean I need to pull the sock off the bottom. I'm not sure yet, but let's pull the upper piece with this bottom piece off. Now the instructions are kind of dicey, but actually you need to pull both the purple wires because there's two wires that go to this. And now we've got this separated. There's actually a sock on the bottom and then another sock here. So let's just set this out of the way where I won't step on it. Next, you can see I pulled the sock off the bottom, and we're going to unplug. I'm going to use probably my flat blade screwdriver here. I'm going to lift these tabs up and unplug this power connection here. Once we have that unplugged, it says to make a small slice and remove this from the factory pump. So we will slice that. Let's see if we can pull this guy off there. Oh, the pump's wanting to come. I have to hold it with two hands here. Should be good now to remove the factory pump. And we were able to do that. Well, let's see that. We'll get it out of there. Tight fit in there, isn't it? Should be able to get it. Now the instructions say to remove the sleeve once you get the pump out. And if you have problems, cut a slit down the side of it. Mine came right out, but they said sometimes it won't. And we need to open this hole up on the bottom to where it's an oval all the way around. So basically taking up the remainder of that shape, we need to take a pair of cutters and open this up. Now that we've trimmed that out, like you can see, we need to put the pump in, but the outlet of the pump that you see right here, that end needs to be on the outermost portion. Here's what I noticed. I was trying to push this in with this piece on the side and it won't go through. So what I did was I went ahead and cut the slit in it like it was talking about. Like they said, it doesn't damage anything. So that's what I did. And as you can see, we got it positioned where it goes. Definitely a lot easier with that cut. I forced it a couple times and it was pushing that sleeve off the pump. Now getting the pump on here with all the fittings and stuff is a little harder because we didn't have any fittings, but it has to sit in there like this. And look, that piece here is kind of formed where it only fits in that way. But you can see we've got the plug on the back, or what I'm going to call the back, between the two spring, basically. That's how it's seated in there. Now this thing's supplied with two socks. The long, skinny one goes on the very outside. The square one that has the opening, see that hole? That's going to center up here on the bottom. So now we need to go ahead and seat it on there. It says to press it on a flat surface to make sure it's fully seated. Next, once we've got that on there, I've tugged on it, it's seated. We need to put this back together, but while we're doing that, we need to make sure that we put this up through this circle opening right here. So it needs to go up through there as we're going back together with it. Now here's a little bit of difference between the instructions and what's actually happening. So it comes with a new line to replace what we fed up through that hole. And so I don't really have an option here other than I'm gonna feed this down through here and I'm gonna hook it. I actually was able to reach down in there and pull this apart. Hopefully it goes back together. You can see that end goes on that. I also took the bottom sock off thinking that may release that, but it didn't. What happens is when these buckets fill up, and so fuel pumps into the bucket to keep the pump cool. And that's why a lot of these aftermarket kits you'll see, they'll cut this bucket all up and do away with this completely. But I'd like to use this as the kit came with it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this line off. We'll then fasten it to this line, run it through the hole, and put this all back together. Man, I was able to do that, but talk about the hardest thing to push on ever. I didn't want to use any tools because I don't want to misshape this, but got it on there. Now we can go back through. Oh man, please. Great. Now we can't because I should have put that on after. Now you can see what I was able to do. It took me a little bit, but I got it in there using this hose because this comes pre-assembled. So we got it on there. Now we can put this back together. Now it's saying to bend the tab slightly up on the end of this. See the little tab there. And the reason we're doing that is we're going to be installing that here. Now these are not polarity sensitive, so we just got to fill these two open cavities. So basically the reverse process of when we took this all apart, we got to put this fuel sender back into place. Once we get those wires pushed in, they sent you a new clip. So we need to install that to lock those wires into place. So there's two clips. There's one for between the wires and then obviously the lock once we get it plugged back in where it goes. So I've got both the lock in place and the red clip in place. And I think the only thing we have left to do, I think there's two things. We've got to get this guy on here. We've got to slide it up on that barb fitting because that's the feed. And then the only thing I think we have left, and I'll read through the instructions to make sure, is put our fuel float back on. Got the clamp in place using some of these. If you're careful, you won't cut through it and it pinches it down. The old instructions show the old hoses that we took off. You know, that's why I had this issue with this guy. Chances are you could probably use the old hoses, but since it comes with new, might as well use the new. Last two things we need to do, we need to put the new sock on the very bottom, and we need to put the float arm back on. And this one shows this sleeve. Mine doesn't have that. So not gonna worry about that. We're just gonna put it back in the way it had this sleeve on it. So we'll just put that in place and that's what we're gonna use. We are now fully assembled. Be careful putting that float arm back on. Don't pry really hard on it. Make sure you still have good movement, and we do. Make sure the fingers are still good. Try not to mess with that in there. And let's set this thing back in the tank. Got it seated in there, and you just want to make sure you orient it the same way it came out. Okay, so all your lines line up. So it was facing this way before. That's the way it needs to face now. And then we need to lock our ring into place. So I'm going to hold the center while we use our brass punch, and we'll just spin that lock back into place. Make sure that your seal is nice and seated. Mine is. You don't want any of it poking out one side, not the other. Now, one of the things I did do was I blew out the lines. So I took those off camera, took them over and blew them out. I mean, I washed this thing. It was all sealed up, but there's a potential that water could have got in some of the lines. So I just wanted to make sure we don't have any issues. But other than that, my tape's dying here, which is fine. I'm gonna cut that piece off probably, and this piece, possibly this piece. I think we can move on to the harness. No instructions for the harness though. Well, good news, bad news. Good news is, I figured out that we're gonna have to take this back apart and change the bulkhead fitting for this guy. Why they don't do it differently, I'm not really sure, but we've got to put this bulkhead fitting on. Okay, so this is gonna go in place of this, which is where the pump plugs in. So how this is gonna work is our stock wire. Now look, you could plug and go just like this, but our stock wiring harness is going to plug in right there. Okay, that's for the evap control. This right here is the power for the pump and the actual fuel level, which are the 4 wires that we were messing with in that plug. And I guess this kit can be purchased separate because it came with a couple duplicate items, one being a new plug to make this all happy, but obviously it came with one of those on the pump. But it sucks, I have to pull this back out so we can replace this bulkhead fitting right here. All we had to do was unplug that plug. Had to take the safety clip out, had to unplug it, and then there's just one clip on the back side that pulls out. You can see that it has a grommet on it, or a seal. Our new one comes with that, so now all we need to do is just go back together, and you can use some of this silicone to help make sure that the seal seats properly. It's almost too easy how it fits in there. It is in. May or may not save that. If you ever wanted to go back to the factory piece, you may need that. I don't know. Chances are if I ever do sub it out, it'll probably be for that billet unit that's in this other box over here. So now we can plug our plug back in, put our lock in, and hopefully put this back in to stay. You can't make this stuff up. They literally supplied a different one. So we're gonna have to pull our 2 purple wires back out, pull the gray lock out, pull the 2 purple wires back out, put them into this, and then plug that into the pump. Why not make this all easy? But that is why this is supplied, I guess. After redoing, and it's a completely different clip. That is so crazy to me. We're ready to go back together again, or at least so I think. So let's get this thing back in the tank for the 2nd time, actually the 3rd time since I power washed it. Get it locked back in. Well, the connections are as follows. The big piece, this is our new harness. Big piece here on our new feed, where we had to replace the plug. We had to take it all back apart for. This is the factory plug that goes to the evap, like I said. And then the line that normally went here to the old plug we pulled out plugs into this other part of the harness. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attempt to probably unplug it and route it differently. I'm going to follow this stock harness down here. You can see our stock connections that plug into the body. These, however, are going to have to go up front. We're going to have to find a place to ground and mount that controller, or that relay, I mean. But let me get this situated kind of where I want it, and then we're ready to go in the car. We now have everything plugged in, zip tied up. I zip tied, I couldn't go under this. I probably could have if I'd taken it apart, but I didn't want to do that. So I zip tied on the top side of it. It's not going to be in the way. and basically trace the factory wire. So these are our factory plugs. This is, we're gonna mount that really close to that. Won't know much until we get it into place. But I've got some other stuff to do here before we slide the tank in. I wanna finish mounting my transmission lines and knock those out really quick. Shouldn't take me long. I'm gonna show you, I got some new pieces to mount the lines to the body. And they're actually the right size. I'll try to list these in the description as well, but I'm gonna get under there and see if we can get that locked in. And once we do that, they run really close on that side, actually, the side with the fill. And so I wanna clean under there where the gas tank goes. I wanna mount my transmission lines, and then we'll get this thing up into place and figure out where we're gonna route the rest of this wiring. I wanted to show you what I got here. So I've got these somewhat mounted for now with those new pieces, and man, do they look nice. This one right here, you can't get behind this one. I could get a nut behind this one, which this kit comes with, but on this one, I can't get behind it. There's no access. So what I did was I drilled and tapped it. I just don't have it snugged down yet. And I'm gonna use a line separator probably back here, I'm guessing. But this is the last attachment point, but it looks really good. Now, the next thing we need to do is I need to know what line goes where. Okay, so we want to come into the transcooler back here with the output port of the transmission, which is the bottom port. Okay, so we want the hot fluid coming in the top and engaging our fan if needed, because that fan switch is installed, remember? And we want the return to be off the bottom, which will be the top port. So basically, top of the transmission is the return, which will come from the bottom of this. So bottom to top and top to bottom. But I'm gonna trace these lines back there so I know exactly what we're gonna get plugged in where. So I'm gonna run up to the front, make sure I've got the right line in the right spot. Now here's what I've determined based off the way I ran my lines. The outside one here goes to the return port. So we want that to be the nice cool stuff. So that'll be coming out of the bottom of the cooler. So what I need to do is I need to put my connector in. Remember, we ordered these straights. One of the things I purchased, and I think is a good idea, is I bought a pair of hose cutters. I think that's a really good idea. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna wrap some electrical tape around the line where I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna leave myself some slack in case I screw this up somehow. I'm gonna cut it like right in here. After I tape it, we're gonna use these new cutters I purchased. I know they look like hedge trimmers. My Cam thought they were hedge trimmers, but they're not. They're for cutting this. So let me tape this up. Let's get it cut and let's see if we can assemble this straight. Holy crap, do these make an awesome cut. Look at that. So now I'm gonna pull my tape apart. We're gonna pull our connector apart. We're gonna get the right tools. And I'm gonna get a little silicone spray and spray on this. And then one of the other things I'll probably do is I'll probably hold this, making sure the line isn't pushing out while we're going together. Pretty simple to put these together though. These aren't quite as bad as some of the others. On fuel lines, I'd probably take them to a buddy of mine who has a crimper. But this deal, basically what we do is we're gonna slide that down over this, making sure that the edge of this comes up and there's a little collar. Let's see if I can get this apart and I'll try to show you. Long-winded. There's a little collar in here that the line needs to come up to. And then we need to just make sure, I'll probably put a little blue tape on this to make sure it's not backing out as we go. I've got that thing shoved in there, like I said, but I put a little blue tape on this, and what this will tell me is if this thing starts to push up and start to loosen up, we'll know that we have a problem. So now I'm gonna go ahead, spray some of my silicone on the connections, and we're gonna start to run this thing down. If this collar starts to push up, we know we got a problem. Generally, you don't have that problem, but sometimes they will push. And if they do, then you need to start over. Sometimes even possibly cut again, but I don't think we'll have that problem. Let's get a little silicone on it and try. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was dreading this part a little bit, but it didn't move, didn't push. You also want to make sure the line doesn't spin. So now we have a connection to install here. I'm gonna take that tape off. We're gonna duplicate the same process on the top one. Now before I clean anything up, I've got those connected. I need to snug them down still. I was testing this. I've got a line separator here. And then on the bottom, what I chose to do was I got everything mounted. These, like I said, with a through bolt, gonna have plenty of spring clearance. I've got another one here, nice and sturdy. Gonna keep the lines away from the exhaust. I did put a little tape around this one. This is the one I threaded. And then I put one more line separator back here just to make sure the lines don't move around a bunch. And I think we're good. So for the fan, we're gonna have to come up with a spot to ground the fan, but kind of how this fan works is the blue is the power. That's gonna loop up into our switch here. And then from the other side of the switch, we need to go up to the front of the car for switched power, okay? And then when this hits 160 or 180, I don't remember what it's set at, the fan will kick on. And even if it doesn't, honestly, guys, I don't necessarily know that we need it, but I did want to buy it with a fan just in case. Let's pull that off there, by the way. So I've got to figure out a way to ground this. I'm sure I can find a way to ground this any other way. Somewhere down here, I'm sure. Or if I have to come in here and ground it on one of these inner panels, I can do that as well. What I'm planning on doing is coming through this opening with the wiring. So probably zip tying to my bar, going through this opening, and then coming out probably like here, and then just zip tying to my lines up towards the front. I'd like to go ahead and get that accomplished so I can clean this area really well and get our gas tank back in. At this point, I'm by myself, so I'm going to use this. I've just got a tarp that the gas tank's setting on, but I'm going to get it up into place. I've got that all cleaned where the tank sets. Obviously, we've got this new wiring harness that's all involved in this deal that I'm going to let just kind of hang on the front side of it. But I'm going to attempt to, I cleaned up my bolts and the threads. I'm going to attempt to get this thing at least started back up into place. Got the gas tank back in here. Actually, guys, I didn't even need to scoot it over there. It's really light when it doesn't have any gas in it. The only things now I need to do, I tightened the 213s for the straps, made sure my lines weren't kinked up and everything, but I need to get my 10 millimeter back in here on this side, and then I'd kind of like to pop this open. Oh, there's my, I was looking for my flathead. Pop that open and kind of see what it looks like now that we have access from the top. So it's close, but we can for sure get a fuel pump in and out of this thing if we ever had an issue. I just wanted to make sure we had no clearance problems, and we're not going to have any problems with anything clearing. Want to make sure nothing was hitting. None of the wires were touching, because we did have a new bundle of wires that we obviously had to tie up here. Looks good.